Good morning. I'm Lulu Chow Wang, and a trustee emeritus of Wellesley and a Wellesley woman. So we're so happy you're all here, and I know some of you might be a little hungover from the celebrations last night. We're here this weekend to celebrate being together as Wellesley women, to celebrate the Wellesley Effect. And last night, many of you were there to celebrate the launch of our new comprehensive capital campaign. We had the most wonderful members of the Wellesley community to help kick it off for us. Our moderator is Linda Wertheimer, and she did a fabulous job, and she introduced many of our Wellesley women to tell their stories of how Wellesley and the Wellesley Effect had affected them. We had Dr. Vivian Pinn from NIH, and Heather Long from CNN, Adeline Lee from the senior class, and they all spoke about how Wellesley taught them to use their voice. And in situations where they were often the only woman, as Wellesley women often are, they learned to raise their hand in a room full of men, to raise their voices as well, and to be able to seize the opportunity. Often opportunities that might have seemed far larger than they were capable of being able to manage, but seizing it and being able to deliver. And that's so much part of the Wellesley Effect, to imagine large and then to perform. At the same time, after we had heard some of the great stories, Kim Bottomley and Andy Shannon spoke, and they spoke about the great ambitions of this campaign. To those of you who were here last night, they announced that it will be sized at $500 million. It will be a historic number for Wellesley as well as for liberal arts colleges, and it's something part of dreaming big, and Wellesley will deliver. I think to soften us up before announcing the size of this audacious campaign, there was a fabulous video. I think many of you saw it, and those of you who didn't see it last night will probably be able to see it online. It's a 10-minute video that is just, I think there wasn't a dry eye in the room after we saw it. It was so evocative. It brought up all the reasons, both hard line and soft line, about why we love Wellesley and what it produces in the kind of women who come to Wellesley. And I think at the announcement of the campaign, Andy Shannon also mentioned that one of the major new initiatives that will be part of the campaign is this, we've codenamed C2C, but College to Career. And it's an initiative that will really, I think, resonate with so many of us here who've been blessed to have a life work that we loved. But sometimes we know finding one's life work is not easy. And the College to Career initiative at Wellesley will embrace every young woman the day she comes to Wellesley, not in her senior year when she's learning how to write resumes and prepare for interviews, but from the moment she enters Wellesley, this will be an ecosystem that will allow her to explore everything that's out there, to explore the possibilities, to dare, to seize, and to succeed. And so I think today it segues into what we'll be hearing from our wonderful panelists today. We have a great group of women speaking this morning and throughout the rest of the morning. So without further ado, I'm going to leave this to Cameran. And before I start, I just want to say, Cameran, we thanked Andy and Kim last night, but we all owe a tremendous thanks to Cameran and her team. The Wellesley Effect event, the success so far of the capital campaign, $300 million out of $500 raised already. It's been all Cameran's hard work. So we're grateful for Cameran's leadership, and Cameran, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. Good job. Thank you. It was great. Okay. Good morning, everybody. You'll see we kept the lights at a very flattering level for all of us groggy people, I want to thank you all for coming. I know it's early. Yesterday, we heard amazing stories of personal transformation and how different alumni experience the Wellesley Effect. And today, this panel and the panels later this morning are going to focus actually on a different aspect of the Wellesley Effect, which is what happens when Wellesley women go out into the world. And I know there are a lot of economics majors in this room, and we like to think about Wellesley in a multiplier effect, that we produce these amazing leaders and they go out and change the world through a multiplier effect. So we've assembled a wonderful panel. We're going to have a lightning round discussion of leadership. College to Career is really aimed at producing leaders and continuing Wellesley's extraordinary tradition of leadership. So I'm going to invite my terrific panel up to the stage, and we are going to get started. Great, great. I feel like Oprah.
Work on our tan up here.
Okay, terrific. I'm going to start by asking the panelists to introduce themselves and say a little bit about their background. I'm going to start with Colleen.
Hi, my name is Colleen Richards Powell. I graduated Wellesley in class of '95. It's wonderful to be here, as always, in the bosom of Mother Wellesley. I cannot think of a place that I love more than New York City, but right before that, right after that, it's Wellesley. Wellesley has really written the lyrics to my adulthood, to my career, and to the wonderful women that I know as mentors and friends. When I graduated Wellesley, I graduated with a degree in political science, and I graduated on Friday, and on Monday, I started a job in Senator Kennedy's office. I worked there for several years, and I knew that I wanted to be either an elected official, I've had my eyes on the United States Senate, or to be an appointed or elected person running an organization in private life. And so I really was ambivalent about that tremendously. And so I just thought I would figure it out experientially. Also, when I graduated, I was elected to the Board of Trustees as the Young Alum Trustee, which I served for a term. It was a wonderful experience to study the legislative process nationally and also to be a policymaker here at my beloved alma mater. Then I decided I really loved the field of education, and I was sort of straddling whether to work in politics outright or to do policy for an educational institution. I eventually went to Harvard and worked in the president's office across all of the schools at Harvard, working with students, which was really something that I still love and enjoy to do. And then finally, I felt like I was sort of stymied in the field of education. There were other things that I wanted to do that were out in the world. So I decided to go back into politics and government. And I most recently was the Chief External Relations and Communications Officer for the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority until a week ago. And then I really kind of wanted to fake it and say that I was a stay-at-home mom for a week, but I'm not, because I'm going back to work on Monday, where I'll be the Vice President for Corporate Citizenship and Diversity at MFS Investment Management here in Boston.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Most importantly, my husband and I adopted a beautiful little baby girl. Her name is Hannah Dorothy, so I am a mother of a 3-month-old newborn. So that's the thing that's most exciting to me right now.
Okay. Amy?
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Suey Luke. I am the class of '90 here at Wellesley. I majored in political science and economics. Professionally, I'm a managing director at the Boston Consulting Group, focusing on capital markets. Previously, I was a partner at Accenture. I also started my career as an investment banker after Wellesley. I have experience in the media fields, did two startups, and personally, I am a wife, mother of 3 kids. My 2 oldest kids are 16-year-old boy-girl twins, so I do feel that I have been running my own gender experiment for the first for 16 years, which has been great, and I have some really funny stories along those lines. And a 13-year-old boy named Andrew. In my spare time, I'm very passionate about education, women's leadership, empowerment, and women's health. And I serve on a number of boards along those lines, the Harvard Business School Women's Association of Greater New York, the Kennedy School Women's Leadership Board, with Victoria, which is always fantastic, Komen NYC Race for the Cure, and I have served on a number of school boards in the New York City area as well.
My name is Julie Levison from the proud Purple class of 1998, originally from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I came to Wellesley, was pre-med, also a history major, did a significant amount of independent study in Spanish, served as a student member of the Wellesley Centers for Women Board and the Board of Trustees. I graduated and followed in Colleen's footsteps as a young alumna trustee. Was very grateful to have received a Rhodes Scholarship and went to Oxford to continue on my historical interests of understanding social context to disease, and so studied the social history of medicine, particularly leprosy. I then went on to begin to realize my original goal, which was to become a physician and take care of patients. I was at Harvard Medical School for my medical training, went on to do primary care internal medicine residency at the Brigham, and then Massachusetts General Hospital for infectious disease training. I focused my passions on research and clinical care for indigent patients, particularly Latino immigrants who have HIV infection, and how do we deliver interventions so that our medical care meets their needs. In addition, I have a tremendously supportive and wonderful family who helps this all happen. My husband, who's here, Josh, our 4-year-old daughter, Anna, and our 16-month-old boy, Caleb.
Wow, great. Right, Alia.
Hi, my name is Alia Gurtov, and I'm a PhD student, so I know all about impatience. This is actually my final year, and I'm looking down the long tunnel of job prospects. So I study anthropology. I'm a paleoanthropologist who looks at the archaeological evidence for human evolution, and everything that I have done since Wellesley, I can trace back to the opportunities that I had here. That's no hyperbole, that's a fact. My advisor, Phil Cole, is an archaeologist in the anthropology department, and I'm sorry to say he's close to retirement. So this was a wonderful opportunity to come back here and say hello to him. So since becoming a Wellesley woman, and having the opportunity as a Wellesley student to go and excavate at a site called Dmanisi in the Republic of Georgia, I've had a series of other opportunities that built from that. So I was able to get a Thomas J. Watson Fellowship, which is an absolutely incredible opportunity for all, if you have relatives who are current students here, encourage them to apply for this. It's a year of traveling and doing whatever you want on the subject that you're most passionate about. So in my case, I was very interested in the intersection between paleoanthropology, human evolution, and nationalism in the various contexts in which paleoanthropology was practiced. And that took me all over the world to sites in Germany, in South Africa, in Turkey, China. I spent a lot of time in the Netherlands just because it's beautiful there. And that actually, that translated later into a master's program that I did at Leiden University in Paleolithic archaeology. And after that, I spent some time looking at stone tools. And then I thought, okay, I'm ready to go back to school. I'm ready to do this PhD thing. I applied to the University of Wisconsin in Madison and was accepted because of all of those experiences that I'd had, that background that I had built up, again, thanks to my opportunities here at Wellesley. And I've been excavating at a site called Olduvai Gorge ever since. I don't know, maybe some of you know this site. Mary Leakey made it famous, another strong woman in science. So that's what I do, and I've recently been involved in another excavation that I'll be telling you about shortly.
Great.
Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm Eileen Conroy, class of 75, and I live in Des Moines, Iowa. That's not where I was born. I was born on the East Coast. And a measure of my love for Wellesley is that this is my 3rd trip in the month of October, through connecting flights. So I get a fix every time I'm here. So I thought I'd go back in time and give you some context as to why I chose Wellesley and highlights of my 4 years here and how that relates to my topic. So I entered the fall of '71. I had applied early decision. I had come here and saw the beautiful campus with my mother, and she said, I think you should apply early decision, and it was a great decision. So I have a lot of classmates here that I've reunited with, and it was an interesting time because I did not choose Wellesley because it was a women's college. I chose it because it was a top college, and it was a beautiful campus. And there were moments that, as Allison can remember, I'm sure, it was right after the college had decided not to go co-ed. And so there was a lot of talk about single sex. And I would say to a friend, if I hear one more time about single sex, not realizing the dividends it would pay. But a funny moment happened during reading period when I called my mother, and it was snowing a lot, sophomore year, and I said, Mom, I'm just not sure about this all women's thing. And she said, well, I went to college when it was all women. I said, Mother, you went when it was World War II. So anyway, some of the highlights of my academic experience that relate to perseverance was I have a lot of great memories. I was poli-sci and economics, but a real intense passion for international relations. And my sophomore year, I took a course with Linda Miller, and she was daunting. And I remember, it's a lot of like, wow, I don't know if I'm going to get through this. And it must just be, I didn't know she was Killer Miller until after I graduated. But I decided senior year to ask her to do a thesis with her. And it's just a really rich memory. And I took several courses with her, and I recently wrote to her and said, I learned more about strategy from you in world politics than I did at Harvard Business School. So I think that's a good bridge point to what I'll talk about. I went to business school and focused a lot in consumer goods, but I'll pick it up on perseverance and hard choices. Thank you.
Okay, great. Wonderful. Well, first, I want to say it's wonderful to be up here with so many extraordinary Wellesley women, many of whom I know, which is an extra pleasure. And I wanted to thank Cameran and all the others at Wellesley who have brought us together for such an important purpose. It is an infusion and a bit of the Wellesley experience all over again. So for me, the Wellesley Effect was incredibly personal and poignant. I actually arrived at Wellesley more than 20 years ago in crisis. I was here in Massachusetts because I needed a spinal fusion. I was young. I was 20 years old at the time that I needed the surgery, and my entire life changed. I went from being a young person having a life like most people do, interested in different topics and issues, and I would go and I would attend a conference in DC or participate in a march on the Mall. But my experience at Wellesley was a moment in my life where I got to choose everything that would come after. I had the gift of the experience that most people have later in life with a quadruple bypass when they don't know whether they'll have the rest of their life in the way they envisioned, and I had that here. And Wellesley, in its incredible and unique way, saw me for who I was, and I found myself here, the way so many women discuss that in the video, and I know so many of you feel in the audience, where I shifted from having an interest in things to understanding that I had the capacity to fundamentally reshape what the world looked like through my passion. Wellesley reset my benchmark of aspiration and then gave me the skills and the network to achieve it, and imparted in me dreams I would not have built for myself. I enjoyed my time here with the same magic and intensity that so many of us do, and was actually having a conversation when I walked in this morning that was literally in this building that I decided that Wellesley was the place for me. It was the first time I had ever stood in what I viewed as a cathedral to women's bodies about our strength, about the capacity of who we could be and how we would build ourselves to get there. During my time at Wellesley, I participated in the Wellesley and Washington Fellowship and was there at the crystallizing points of an organization called the International Association of Women Judges. And we would write women's rights into the Constitution during times of constitutional flux. So like so many of the innovative practices that are now taking place in liberal arts education, I had the skills to immediately participate in policymaking, and that set my course and trajectory truly for all that has followed. I lead the Women in Public Policy program at Harvard University, where I did my graduate studies. And my work focuses on how we train and educate leaders to close gaps for women and girls. And through that, I meet Wellesley women everywhere I go, whether it's working with the United Nations on creating institutes for peace and gender studies, whether it's having Susan Reverby, who's still at the college, who chaired women's studies when I was here, bring her students to our center to learn about how you put into practice what research is defined by academics. I work regularly with the White House Council on Women and Girls, defining an agenda for the future. And with things as far afield where I get to see Pamela Melroy, I'm going to NASA in a few weeks to talk with them. And I work regularly with all types of different branches. But my ability to believe that I have the capacity to do that is what began here, and it's such a wonderful thing to come back here.
Thank you. So we have a wonderful panel, as you can see, and I would also add that I am, as I look down the row, everybody here has been so involved and as a volunteer for Wellesley. I mean, when Eileen says this is like the 4th trip she's made in a month, we asked her to consider getting an apartment in Wellesley for us. We asked each of the panelists to think about their leadership journey and think about a word that captured it. So we're now going to ask them to each talk about their word, why they chose it, and what it means to them, and I'm going to start with Colleen.
Okay, thanks. The word I chose was resilience, and I chose it because our former Dean of Religious Life, Victor Kazanjian, had this wonderful speech that I'm certain all of you very involved alumni heard at Alumni Leadership Council, where he talked about the concept of wholeness versus perfection. And I remembered thinking, also as a spiritual person, that I spend so much time as a high-achieving woman trying to be perfect, rather trying to fool people into thinking that I'm perfect, including myself, and at the same time being constantly tripped up by my shortcomings, be they situational or personal, and my own flaws. And I remembered hearing that speech and thinking how much more instructive it was to think about being excellent, because sometimes I was raised to think that you had to be twice as good and work twice as hard, and I realized that I just couldn't. I can't work twice as hard, and twice as hard as what? I'm kind of a workaholic. I have a very strong work ethic that I learned from my parents and family. I'm very connected to my values, and I felt that it was a better framework to think about, let me be my best self wherever I am. Let me show up fully and completely, and let me do what is natural and true to me and live out my passion. And I think I had the confidence to do that as a result of my Wellesley education. I'd, been raised as this driven New Yorker, child of immigrants, go, 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 do, achieve. And I found that there were a few things that I could plan things as well as I could, but the thing that actually was going to matter more was how resilient I was in bouncing back from things that didn't go how I had planned. That was going to be far more important. So as I, in my own career, have dealt with students and talked with them, what I noticed, particularly when I was at Harvard dealing across the student body, is I noticed a difference between my male and female students. The females women students wanted to be perfect, just like I did. Male students wanted to be excellent in a few things that made them distinctive, but they weren't beating themselves up for the fact that they hadn't clipped their toenails in 3 weeks. So I thought, you know what, that's actually probably a better way to use one's energy to really figure out what's important. So I was thinking about this topic, and I thought of a few things. Number one, I think that luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I remember meeting a woman who was about 20 years old, and she said, gosh, it's just amazing how you've built your career. She was in her 20s, and she said, it's amazing how you built your careers, how you made the right transition at every right point, how you transitioned from field to field, and how you found these perfect positions. And I kind of looked at her and I said, is that what it looks like? Because everybody's bio reads that way, but that's not what it felt like. What it felt like was that I was making whatever choices that I could given the circumstances around me. And sometimes it was, gee, I can't stand this job, let me get out of it. And sometimes it was, gee, this is a really exciting opportunity that comes at an odd point. I've tended to be an early or late bloomer in everything. I got married very early. I had children technically fairly late. I also did everything. I was a trustee very early, so I'm never on time for anything. I'm always really early or really late. So I really haven't been able to chart my path on anyone else's, which has been a real incredible blessing. So I would say, number one, be prepared. Because I was working hard and doing the right things, most of the jobs I've had, I've got to say, I don't know if I've ever really looked for a job. They've come and found me, and opportunities have presented themselves. And it's really been because of someone who knew of me and said, you know what, you really need to talk to Colleen. Second of all, I would say that excellence is its own reward. I really believe in just hard work and being excellent. If my name's going to be on it, and if I'm going to spend my time on it, I really want it to reflect my best self. Finally, I would say Wellesley is so wonderful in creating this amazing network of women, and I believe that we should nurture and tend to our networks. Stay in touch with your friends. Stay in touch with your classmates. You never know when you can be helpful to someone who may need to know of a resource or an opportunity that you may be able to avail them of, and vice versa. And finally, I would say just each one reach one. When I left Senator Kennedy's office, I filled the spot with a Wellesley woman, and I told her that her job was to do the same when she was departing. So there were 4 Wellesley women that came there after me. And I think I was the first, but I made sure I wasn't going to be the last. And so I think that Madeleine Albright says that there's a special place in hell for women who don't help one another. Well, there's an even hotter place for Wellesley women who don't help.
Okay, thank you. Great. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Amy.
That's great. So I graduated 30 years ago, which puts me in my mid-40s, and I like to think that this is actually a fantastic place because I've had enough life experiences that have been very, very interesting, bad, good, ugly, and enough time to actually understand and have perspective and to be able to learn from them, and enough runway left in my career and my life to actually apply them and really teach others and mentor others. So in thinking about this topic, I think that courage is one thing that has really struck me as a really rare trait that I've found in people. I think it's an important trait, and I'm not talking about running into a burning building, which is amazing in itself, but I'm talking about more the moral courage, the ability to stand for your principles, fight for them, and take action, and affect real change in your organization where you live. And like many of you, I've worked at multinational companies, and I have been astounded, almost monthly or weekly, that there are so many senior executives who are not courageous, who do not take the hard stand on things, who do not speak up when they know that they probably should for a variety of reasons. And we see this in companies, organizations, nonprofit organizations, religious institutions, you name it, they're everywhere. And I'm just always astounded that courage is so important and so rarely found. Mm-hmm. So I really do feel that that is definitely a truth that I've learned in my in the experience I've had over the last 30 years since graduating. The second observation I have is that I think Wellesley women are much more courageous than the average person out there, and that is a great thing. I think that universities across the board teach their students to be critical thinkers. They write great papers, they argue points in these papers, they get A's on these papers. However, what I think Wellesley taught me, and I think all of us, is to be able to have a principle, stand for your principle in real life, in real time, when the stakes are high, when you're dealing with people, when things are really often ugly and not clear, uncertain, and to be able to be comfortable with being uncomfortable and deal with it, and actually, just take a stand and be courageous to make a change and affect change in your institution. After I graduated from Wellesley, I took a job as an analyst at a global investment bank. And back in the 90s, these were the hot jobs to get. I loved it. I loved the deals. I loved the people. To a masochistic standpoint, I actually liked the long hours. And things had been going well. I was doing very well as an analyst. I was a second-year analyst at this time. I had also been asked to run analyst recruiting, which was an honor. And on this one deal that I was working on, it was for a southern utility client. We had been working on it for 3 months. It had been going well. 3 months into the deal, my MD comes over to me and says, "Amy, you're doing a great job. We want you to keep doing the spreadsheets, keep running the numbers, but we decided that we want to send a male analyst in your place to present your work." And I said, excuse me? And the answer that I got was, well, we think that it will make the client, who was a male Southern Utility executive, feel more comfortable in telling his dirty jokes. Oh. And I think obviously you may say, how did this happen in 1991? I think what was really which really surprised me, is that so many people, I'd say 98 of my peers and colleagues, did not understand that this was wrong. I had female MDs tell me, "This is just the way business is, Amy. Let it lie. Don't rock the boat." Very well-educated peers of mine did not understand the situation until I reversed it, and I said, listen, imagine you're on an all-female deal team, and you're the only guy analyst, and they don't want you to come to the meeting because you're a man, and they would immediately say, "Oh, that's horrible. Like, yeah, that's not right." So. I think that I totally credit Wellesley for giving me the wherewithal at age 21 to understand that even if the female MD says, "This is the way business is, don't rock the boat," that I understood that if this was true and this is the way business is, this is not the way business should be. And I was able to diplomatically escalate it to the head of investment banking, who I had a relationship with through helping run recruiting. And what we were able to find out through forming a task force is that this was not an isolated incident. And it even went as far as female MDs not being able to go to their own closing dinners because they were held at all-male country clubs. So, it was really amazing to me. And I think it was, when I look back, it was clearly a life inflection moment that empowered me to know that age 21, you could really affect change sort of at the bottom of the totem pole. And since then, in terms of my career, I've had lots of opportunities to do that and the importance of speaking up. Another point on courage, I think, is the sort of philosophy, the mantra of feel the fear and do it anyway. I often say that to myself, and I think what women sometimes don't do is we want to be, to Colleen's point, being perfect and taking these stretch assignments. Sometimes we're like, well, I'm not quite ready for that. But as Linda Hill at HBS says, the stretch assignments are what really, really propel you in your career. So I think that, just in terms of being courageous, doing something that might be out of your comfort zone, it really can help you in your career. And then lastly, I love the quote by Mark Twain, it is curious that physical courage is so prevalent and moral courage so rare. And in thinking about that quote in the context of today's panel, the only conclusion is because not everyone can be as lucky to go to Wellesley. And I'm just convinced that dynamic women in large quantities can truly change the world if we're all a little courageous.
Excellent.
So my words that I chose were think big. And I think thinking big is, for me, not one windfall moment, but a series of smaller decisions, events, choices that lead to out-of-the-box thinking. I think thinking big is part about imagination and part about creativity, but also about, as Lulu said, the ecosystem in which all of this is happening. I think Wellesley, for me, created this pathway, as we all have been speaking about learning to ask questions, learning how to define what are the critical questions and how do I go about answering them. I remember showing up at Wellesley and picking this great view from Clapp Library, looking out onto Lake Waban and reading books that I had never read before. As I mentioned, I knew that I wanted to be a physician, but I began reading history and falling in love with stories, which in many ways is what patient care is about, soliciting the life story for patients who tell us their history, and we document that. And I remember showing up in Marjorie Agosin's class, Censorship and Creativity, which I would say was a required writing class that I was an alternate choice and was a decision that changed my life because she is still my mentor. And remember becoming enamored in this leader who had just presented before the UN on women's rights, learning about East Asian religions and reading the Bhagavad Gita and beginning to learn about other cultures that would inform questions. So then I sat in Katie Park's class on Renaissance and medicine and began reading the Decameron, which talked about the Renaissance period where people with plague by their own families were discarded at the roadside because they didn't understand what contagion was about. And that period led to a whole series of investigations and, like anthropology, going into archives and interviewing people to try to understand how societies respond to disease. What does it say about ourselves? So thinking big to me is a series of small choices shaped by loving and nurturing people who know us, that give us the courage to ask questions that we think would not ordinarily be usual. I then went on to study this further, to look at leprosy as a disease that's thought to be known for a really long time, and syphilis, which was something new in the 16th century. I did that at Oxford. It laid a whole framework of a historical thinking to think about public health now. Two short stories that I'll tell, one about courage, because I think moral courage is a large part about thinking big. When I was a medical resident, was in the, around 2005, was the real height in Guantanamo Bay, where enemy combatants were incarcerated. No physicians were allowed, nor international organizations, to be able to examine individuals who were hunger striking because they felt that the terms in which they were incarcerated were unethical. I was working with a group of physicians who, because I had told my primary care residency director I wanted to learn how to care for survivors of torture. Lawyers had approached us because this group of mentors happened to be well known, and they said, will you review the medical record of 3 detainees to comment on the ethics of being force-fed by the military officials if they were hunger striking? And so we submitted briefs to the federal court about the ethics of nasogastric force feeding. That was a maybe not apparent way of thinking big, and no one thought it was particularly the role of the physician to speak out. But not many people were speaking out other than journalists and some organizations, international organizations, because no one knew what was going on. And the physician, I think, played an important role in shaping ethics. The other part, I think, about thinking big is what I try to do is closing this gap in HIV infection. We have medications biologically that have the possibility of treating HIV, and yet 30% of our population still have uncontrolled infection. And it's not happenstance or chance as to why this is. These are predominantly racial and ethnic minorities who are not reaping the benefits of modern medicine. So What I'm working with the team of individuals is going out into the communities and trying to understand how patients make decisions and what their needs are. And we learn very rational choices that people make when we have to decide about going to work, putting food on the table, or as a mom taking care of our children. Those are perfectly rational decisions as to why I'm not showing up to my appointments. So we need to think about re-envisioning our healthcare delivery so we're not waiting for people to come to our doorstep, but we're going to the community and bringing them what they need, which is not only care, but it's an influenza shot, it's food, it's access to dental care, and it's all the things and ingredients that help people feel like they're actually valued in society. So I mentioned that thinking big is not just one big moment, but it's a series of events within a community of support that helps, I think, to create moral courage and out-of-the-box thinking.
Thank you.
So my word, my phrase is dream team. And that's because 6 years after emerging from Wellesley in '07, I found myself once again in a team of women. I was one of 6 women to participate in a discovery that some of you may have heard of. It was published in September, 2 years after it had been discovered. There's a new member of our family tree called Homo naledi. And this was a discovery that was made in South Africa. And it was initially the vision of a very well-known paleoanthropologist named Lee Berger to begin systematically exploring the caves in a World Heritage UNESCO site, the cradle of humankind. And this area had been dismissed as being a potential for future discoveries because we thought we'd tapped it out. And lo and behold, we found this pit of bones representing at least 15 individuals of this hominin that we now know as Homo naledi. And this is, for me, a perfect example of luck meeting preparation, because I woke up one morning and I rolled over and I opened Facebook, and there was this solicitation for somebody who was a very experienced archeologist, paleoanthropologist, anatomist. A breadth of training was requested. And in addition to that, they needed to be a team player, willing to work in cramped spaces. They needed to have caving experience. Climbing experience was preferable. And they needed to be small-bodied. And I thought, I know what to do here. And I figuratively raised my hand because that's what I'd been trained to do. When there was a challenge that I felt like I could meet, and one that I cared about, which was the study of human evolution, I knew as a Wellesley woman to reach for it. So I updated my CV and I sent it in. And lo and behold, it turned out to be this big discovery. We thought we only had one individual in there, and it ended up being at least 15, and we've only excavated a small portion of it. And there I was with one of 6 women to go in and excavate in this very remote part of a cave 90 feet underground. And that was an incredible collaborative experience that I had with these very strong, courageous women who were willing to squeeze between solid rock to find our ancestors. And one of the fantastic opportunities that presented itself as a result of this was outreach. We Skyped in while we were doing the excavation to classrooms around the world, and we maintained blogs, and we tweeted, and we personally went and visited classrooms whenever we had the opportunity. Since the publication in September, the press has really taken this story up again, and it's felt a little bit conflicting for me, because as much experience as the 6 of us had as experts in our field, young experts in our field, one of the things that was most asked about, most spoken about, was our size. We were small women. We were skinny women, we were tiny women, we were waifs. It was bizarre. And this was the message that was being presented to to the broader community and to the young women, the children, the girls, the boys, and everyone in between, and however you would like to express that spectrum, all the people that might one day be scientists, we're once again getting this message about our bodies instead of our minds. And so I was feeling conflicted about this, like I said, and so I turned to those other 5 women who were going through this with me. Around the world, they were all having these similar experiences, and I asked them what's going on, and I knew I could lean on them for support, because that is strength, being willing to ask for other people how to, face the issues that you're facing. And I watched how they handled this, and we actually managed to sort of change the discourse and redirect how we were being portrayed in the media. And I know this is such a small thing, and yet it's so insidious, the way that these messages get out there. And I have 9 seconds left, but I'm going to tell you one more thing, which is that when I was putting together a talk recently, I wanted to make a figure that showed how we are related to living primates, apes, and lesser apes. And I wanted to have a woman there representing the people branch. And when I typed in woman, it was all stock footage of predominantly white women for the first 3 lines in the Google images. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's depressing. So then I typed in person, and you know what I found? White men, exclusively, and Kim Jong-un. So there's a lot to be done in how we present ourselves, and I think we are a dream team of women who can change the way that women in science are presented, women in industry, women in the world. So thank you.
Oh, wow. Wow. Inspiring. My word choice is perseverance and hard choices. So I'll begin with the meaning of the Wellesley Effect for me, which was reinforced yesterday, is pride in self and maintain a standard of excellence in your approach to things, even if the environment doesn't support it. So after Wellesley, as I said, I went to Harvard Business School, and for 15 years, I worked in consumer goods and loved it at Kraft and Colgate-Palmolive. Really enjoyed the adrenaline of bringing new products to market and the creativity and the analytical skills. And I got to a point that everybody spoke the same language, and I look back on this now and think, why was that a problem? But I was recruited by Russell Reynolds to go to a company that was publicly traded and also had an influence of family ownership in Rhode Island. And my hiring manager was from Harvard Business School, so I thought, the stars are aligned. And my stint there was for 3 years. And for the first 18 months, I was kind of knocking everything out on all cylinders. I kind of implemented new product processes where before the head of manufacturing would decide what they were going to do, and improve the market share as well as the gross margin. And I went into work one day, and my hiring manager, after 18 months, said, well, you went from walking on water to now people have a problem with your style. And this was the first time that I had ever kind of had negative feedback in 15 years. And I was kind of shocked. And then he said, so because this is a small company, we have to deal with this. You either have to change or ... And then he said, so what we like to do in these cases is to send you to our company's psychologist. Yeah, similar to you ask yourself, it was 1995, and I thought, what would a Wellesley woman do in this situation? So I kind of thought, all right, I'm going to go through this, but I know I'm getting out of here. And so I went for the assessment, and he spoke to me, I guess, for maybe an hour or two, and I received the assessment in the mail. And it started out by saying, Eileen Conroy would be very suited to being a 4-star general or the CEO of a Fortune 500 company. But she is,
Well done.
and I'll keep the identity anonymous. I'll talk about it after the break. But she is not suited to X. I stared at it, read it twice, called a couple Wellesley friends and my mother. And I said, wow, I just got a great report card. And I'm going to take this pride of self and standard of excellence that's not going to flourish here and take it somewhere else. So I'm the kind of person that I was never comfortable just resigning. So I did get out of that situation. And as with Alice Hummer featured in the Wellesley magazine a couple issues ago, what happens when you get a bump in the road? It doesn't go the way you wanted. And so it's kind of like the message to me for leadership was, you know, figure out the environment, what you can change, what you can't change, and, you know, have monitoring along the way. And it's not that, you know, as much as I sound great now, when he talked to me, I thought, oh, I must have done something wrong. And then when I got that assessment, I went, this is the place, not you. So thank you.
So I want to talk a little bit about some of the things we heard across the panel. And I'm going to open by sharing one of the things I do is work with the military. And one of the equivalent of the highest ranking woman in the US military is a woman who's a general, General Legere, and she said something which Eileen brought to mind, so I will open with, she said that women need to find groups of women who hold each other accountable for their talent. I know of no group of women or individuals in the world who hold each other more accountable for their talent than Wellesley. So my leadership journey at Harvard was about creating something which could change what people believed could not be changed. To fundamentally build a vision of the world that had never been, and coalesce a set of stakeholders that had no reason to come together to make it so. So over the nearly 20 years, we have built a team of students, faculty, staff, policymakers, alumna, women and men in positions of authority and positions not in authority across the globe to redefine the fabric of cultures, communities, and authority structures so that it is not by lottery whether you have a life which is of meaning and value, but whether you're born male or female, you have the equivalent choice. And I should, of course, say, in anywhere on the spectrum which we have created culturally as binary, but which we know today is not, that no matter who you are, you can make a full, impactful contribution in the world. What was so fascinating is, though you may not know of Harvard University's Women in Public Policy program, you'll know of our work. If you've ever read the Gender Equality Report from the World Economic Forum, we built the metrics. If you followed President Obama's executive orders and executive actions about creating change around gender, we did the underpinnings of the research and advised to make them happen. If you participated and followed our own Secretary of State, Hillary Rodham Clinton, with the Women in Public Service Initiative, I was our representative from Wellesley to serve in that role to help decide what we could do as a community at Wellesley, and from that became an advisor to fundamentally doing the research underpinnings for a policy where the United States decided for the first time that by policy we would need women in positions of leadership around the globe. And when I began my journey, I thought all the time about what were the opportunities to create equality for women. And I understood that policymakers believed that this was an important issue, but too large an issue to solve. And what I realized was it wasn't about opportunity. Young leaders think about opportunities for the issue, themselves, and the institution. Seasoned leaders understand that it's about the responsibility of the institution to the impact it can make in the world. And how do you set a benchmark for an organization or an institution such that the mobilization of resources becomes foremost so that it can fundamentally make the impact today and into the future that it can on a global landscape? And if I turn back to both what Amy talked about and Colleen talked about, all women in every culture in the world are raised with the fundamental cult of perfection. But perfection robs us of experience and creates leadership benchmarks and ceilings because no one can be perfect. And most importantly, our leaders need to have gone through periods of challenge and failure or you're ill-equipped. And what I think Wellesley has done so effectively that I have drawn upon time and again is to be able to take the risks where failure has got to be in the mix of what would be possible, and to have the confidence to understand that it's the feedback loop. That with every experience we learn new things, which we then put in our toolkit that we bring with us when we lead. And that fundamentally, as Wellesley women, what we know is that we have a network, we have a set of skills, and we have that unbelievable, flexible architecture of thinking which we learned here. And lastly, I just have to say, though I have spent 20 years at Harvard, there is nothing like coming back to Wellesley and to always know that Wellesley is your home. Thank you.
Well, I have to say I'm sitting listening to them and have the privilege of looking out at this giant blue W in the back and just thinking it's just a wonderful conversation and a wonderful testament to the institution that we love so much. We are at our closing time, so we do not have time for questions, but everybody will be around later. I wanted to give you a preview of the next few hours and what's in store. We have 4 wonderful panels, and we have golf carts to take you to the different locations. So I know it's a little chilly. We have a panel on public service and civic engagement in the Science Center, and again, golf carts to go there. We have a panel on the political process, moderated by my classmate, in Collins Cinema, which is across from the Davis Museum. We have a panel on STEM and science in the Science Center, 277, that's moderated by our president, Kim Bottomley. And we have a panel on business, which will be in Jewett Auditorium and is moderated by Lois Juler-Burr. So something for everybody. After those panels, we will have an opportunity to meet with the students. The students are very excited. We've set the room up with small tables so that there will be a real opportunity for students and alumni to learn from and inspire each other. And we are going to have a wonderful closing lunch. One of the great joys for me is every year there's a senior lunch where the graduating seniors become members of the Alumni Association, and faculty speak to them and impart these life lessons. And every time I hear it, I think, these lessons are so applicable for alumni at all life stages. So we've asked 2 of the faculty to reprise their remarks for a broader group, and they've agreed. So it should be a wonderful way to end the day. I wanted to close by thanking this amazing group of women for coming so early, and thanking you as well.